Kyungju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values preserved over time have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Kyungju come together. APEC meets Kyungju.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, September 30th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung is playing host to his Japanese counterpart Shigeru Ishiba in the southern port city of Busan as part of their so-called shuttle diplomacy. Meanwhile, restoring online government services remains a daunting task as authorities believe it may take about a month for the complete return of normal operations following the recent fire at the National Data Center in Daejeon. And on the local political front, the Lee Jae-myung administration and the ruling Democratic Party are seeking to do away with the breach of trust charge to allow more leeway for corporate activities, but the opposition People Power Party is crying foul. We start our newscast today over in the southern port city of Busan, where President Lee Jae-myung is hosting Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba for a two-day visit. For more on the bilateral summit, I have our correspondent Yoon Jung-min standing by live. Jung-min, welcome. So what's the latest there?
Hello, Sunny. So talks are underway here in Busan to discuss bilateral cooperation on a range of issues. The two leaders, President Lee Jae-myung and Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, are sitting down once again after around a month since their last talks. Their talks will be centered on bilateral cooperation on tackling population decline and revitalizing regions outside their respective capitals, as well as on AI and hydrogen energy. We also expect a message, a partnership taking into account the fast-changing global trade order, as well as a three-way cooperation with the U.S. for regional security. Their meeting will be followed by a dinner.
Right. Jung-min, do tell us a bit about the importance of this latest interaction between the leaders of South Korea and Japan.
Right, Sunny. So today's meeting is a reflection of the full restoration of their so-called shuttle diplomacy. Take a listen to the president's top security advisor.
It's meaningful that we show our will to solidify the virtuous cycle of communication and cooperation by the leaders of South Korea and Japan completing reciprocal visits.
Ishiba is on a two-day visit to South Korea, which is his first and will be his last visit as Prime Minister. Japan's Liberal Democratic Party is set to elect a new leader in October, so it's more of a farewell meeting. Since taking office in June, President Lee has met Prime Minister Ishiba 3 times, first in Canada on the sidelines of the G7 summit, next in Tokyo, and this time in Busan. And it's the first time in 21 years that a Japanese leader is visiting a city other than Seoul for a bilateral summit. When the two met in Tokyo last month, they shared a consensus that their next meeting would take place outside the capital, with balanced regional development being their common concern. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Ishiba paid a visit to the grave of the late Lee Soo-hyun in Busan, a Korean student who sacrificed his life in 2001 to rescue a Japanese man who had fallen onto the tracks at a railway station in Tokyo. He is seen as a symbolic figure of South Korea-Japan friendship. Back to you, Sunny.
Indeed, Chungmin, he is. All right, then, thank you for the latest from Busan. Now, ahead of his departure for the southern port city of Busan, the president chaired his weekly cabinet meeting and paved the path for a significant shake-up of the government structure. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin has details.
Major changes are coming to South Korea's government. On Tuesday, the cabinet passed an amendment to the government reorganization bill. The centerpiece is the prosecution reform, a key campaign pledge of President Lee Jae-myung.
그래서 검찰 제도를 개편하는 문제는 정말로 중요한 일이에요. 특히 이제 한 국가 공동체의 질서를 유지하는 최종 기구거든요. 죄진 사람은 오히려 보호해가지고 억울한 피해자를 깜빵 보내고 나쁜 사람한테 돈 뜯게 해주고 이거 진짜 많아요.
Under the new law, the prosecutor's office will be dismantled and replaced by two new agencies, one overseeing investigations under the Interior Ministry and another handling indictments under the Justice Ministry. Following a one-year grace period, the new agencies are set to launch in October 2026. Another major change involves the Finance Ministry. While it will continue managing taxation, economic policy, and treasury matters, its budget planning responsibilities will be transferred to a newly created agency under the Prime Minister's office at the start of next year. This is to strengthen checks and balances within the government and ensure more transparent fiscal management.
The reorganization will require tighter coordination among ministries and frequent consultations. President Lee has called for regular inter-ministerial meetings, with key developments reported directly to him.
Also during Tuesday's meeting, the president ordered all government ministries to inspect their facilities and systems related to public safety and cybersecurity following the recent fire at the National Information Resources Service data center.
다음 주 국무회의 때까지 각 부처들은 전부 이거는 이런 문제가 있을 걸로 보이지는데 점검했더니 문제가 없다. 또는 이거는 문제가 있다. 아니면 이건 시스템을 보강해야 된다. 이거는 이런 매뉴얼을 보강해야 되겠다. 뭐 문제점이 있는 것들을 최대한 좀 발굴을 해서
A comprehensive review will be carried out at next week's cabinet meeting. The president went on to criticize the government for failing to establish an emergency backup system that would have allowed online services to continue operating from alternative data centers. The creation of this system will be overseen by the Presidential National AI Strategy Committee, launched earlier this month. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And in related news, restoring online government services remains a daunting task as authorities believe it may take about 1 month for the complete return of normal operations. Following, of course, last Friday's fire at the National Data Center in Daejeon. Our Oh Soo-young has the latest.
Authorities are making all-out efforts to bring disrupted public services back online after Friday's fire at a major public data centre paralysed government systems across the country. As of Tuesday, only 87 of 647 disrupted government services had been restored, a recovery rate of about 13%. Some services, including the issuing of resident registration certificates through the Gov't.kr portal, came back online on Monday. Korea Post also said fresh food parcel counters would reopen from Tuesday following the restoration of postal and financial services ahead of the Chuseok holiday rush. While the government is first restoring 551 systems that suffered no physical damage, the rest were completely destroyed by fire. A full recovery will take at least a month, according to the Ministry of Interior and Safety.
The government is focusing all resources on restoring critical services as quickly as possible. However, 96 systems from the destroyed data hall cannot be immediately restarted. So we are transferring them to the Daegu Center's cloud system to secure alternatives as fast as possible.
Among those 96 systems destroyed by the fire, the National Disaster and Safety Portal, which provides updates on emergency guidelines, shelter locations, and disaster recovery support in the event of emergencies, is still offline. Internal networks such as the Onnara cloud, used for daily administrative tasks, were also lost in the blaze, forcing some officers to revert to handwritten documents.
We deeply apologize once again to the public. It is expected to take about 2 weeks to prepare the resources and another 2 weeks to set up the systems, but we aim to accelerate the process as much as possible with cooperation from firms already housed at the Daegu Center.
With prolonged disruptions inevitable, authorities are providing relief measures. September property tax payment deadlines have been extended, while fees for issuing resident documents are being waived. An Interior Ministry official told Arirang News that when it comes to foreign nationals, immigration and visa services under the Justice Ministry's data systems have not been disrupted. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in New York, on the last day of this year's UN General Assembly, that is this past Monday, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sun-kyung took to the podium to reaffirm his regime's commitment to its nuclear arsenal. Our Lee Seung-jae covers his remarks.
A senior North Korean diplomat has reaffirmed that Pyongyang will never give up its nuclear weapon, calling it a sacred and untouchable cornerstone of its sovereignty. Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sun-kyung delivered the remarks on Monday at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. It was the first time a high-ranking North Korean official had spoken from the assembly podium since 2018. Kim declared that the nuclear arsenal is enshrined in both North Korea's law and the Constitution, describing it as an absolute asset that guarantees survival. He also argued that calls for denuclearization amount to demanding that North Korea surrender its sovereignty and right to exist.
We will never give up nuclear power, which is our state law, national policy, and sovereign power, as well as the right to existence. Under any circumstances, we will never walk away from this position.
The speech came as the U.S. maintains its policy of complete denuclearization of North Korea. Washington has left the door open for talks with the regime, and leader Kim Jong-un has previously signaled conditional openness to dialogue. Still, the vice minister rejected any scenario where the nuclear program would be abandoned. Kim also criticized joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea and trilateral drills with Japan, describing them as real war simulations aimed at the North. He framed these activities as justification for Pyongyang's nuclear stance. However, the diplomat also hinted at openness to engagement. He said North Korea is willing to expand cooperation with countries that treat it with respect and pursue friendly relations, regardless of differences in political systems. The speech comes as both Seoul and Washington say they hope to re-engage Pyongyang in talks aimed at reducing tensions and advancing peace on the Korean peninsula. There's also speculation that President Donald Trump could seek to revive direct dialogue with Kim Jong-un during his upcoming visit to South Korea for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit at the end of October. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Lee administration and the ruling party are seeking to do away with the breach of trust charge to allow more leeway for corporate activities. The opposition party is crying foul. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin explains.
The South Korean government and ruling Democratic Party announced that they plan to abolish the charge of criminal breach of trust. The decision was announced at an economic task force meeting on Tuesday to discuss rationalizing economic criminal and civil liabilities. The criminal breach of duty or breach of trust charge is generally applied to owners, directors, or managers of a business who are accused of gaining proprietary profit, benefiting a third party, or damaging one's business by breaching their duty. The ruling Democratic Party claims that breach of trust charge often burdens businesses and hampers innovation, as business decisions that lead to a loss could be examined as a crime of breach of trust.
We will prepare improvement measures for breach of trust, which has been identified as a factor constraining corporate management activities while establishing institutional safeguards.
However, the People Power Party says the move harms employees and investors who suffer losses due to breach of trust. PPP Policy Committee Chair Kim Do-up told reporters on Tuesday that the abolition is simply about granting immunity to those who have brought loss to corporations.
The move to abolish criminal breach of trust is merely to save Lee Jae-myung, and it is contradictory to creating a better country for business.
This claim comes as President Lee faces the same charge in the Daejang-dong land development case, where the trial is currently suspended. Criminal breach of trust was one among the 110 financial crimes that are being prioritized for improvement by the ruling party and government. An Song-jin, Arirang News.
Come late November, South Korea's homegrown Nuri rocket will launch into space for a fourth time following its last test back in May 2023. Our Park Kon-woo files this report.
November 27th. The domestically developed Nuri rocket is set to blast off for its fourth launch from Gyeonggi County in Jeollanam-do province in the country's southwest. The Korea Aerospace Administration said Tuesday that the launch is scheduled for around 1 a.m. that day, with backup dates running through December 4th in the case of any variables such as the weather. This will be the first nighttime launch as the timing is optimal for one of the main satellites on board to enter its mission orbit, where it'll observe auroras and the atmosphere. But the exact time will be confirmed the day before. The process for a successful launch is ongoing, with the wet dress rehearsal, a critical pre-launch test to check whether the launch vehicle can withstand extreme cryogenic temperatures, was completed earlier this month. The spaceship will also carry a biocabinet, enabling biological experiments in space, a first for Korea. And another standout for this launch is that it's being conducted by a private company, Hanwha Aerospace, for the first time, although with governmental support.
The government should be supporting companies with technology or funding. Space competition is no longer a hegemony fight or just for expedition. You need to see it from a space economics perspective. That's why a transition to a private-led operation is important.
This launch marks the first since the establishment of the Korea Aerospace Administration after the last Nuri launch in May 2023, following the first in 2021 and the second in 2022. And officials say especially this mission will be a key step toward the rocket's commercialization.
If private companies keep strengthening their capabilities with steady support from space agencies, they'll gain the capacity to launch on their own, opening the way for Nuri to place commercial satellites as well as public ones into orbit.
He added that will even lead to private companies exporting their services later on. And with more Nuri launches planned over the next few years, Korea is steadily preparing to move into orbit as a space powerhouse. Park Kon-woo, Arirang News.
In other news, industry leaders, researchers and policymakers are gathered here in Seoul for an AI event that shares the latest innovations and explores potential advancements. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young reports.
AI Week, a place to have a peek at South Korea's AI innovation landscape, kicked off in Seoul on Tuesday, hosted by the Ministry of Science and ICT. The event serves as a national strategic platform to showcase Korea's vision and cooperation across AI industries, policies, technologies, and networking. This three-day event saw the full participation of global tech giants such as OpenAI and Perplexity. Perplexity outlined its strategy for targeting the broader Asian market, including South Korea, while OpenAI highlighted the critical importance of the Korean market.
Fundamentally, it comes down to when you look at any given metric, whether that's user adoption, whether that's the government support for AI, whether that's how companies are deploying AI, on all of those different vectors, Korea is really leading the charge.
Meanwhile, cutting-edge AI solutions were on full display in the exhibition area, including digital healthcare. One company introduced an AI-based life care service specifically designed for elderly people living alone.
As single-person households continue to increase and Korea has already entered a super-age society with the population over 65 growing, we expect the demand for our service to rise significantly.
This care service utilizes IoT sensors and AI algorithms to monitor the daily activities of elderly users remotely, providing timely alerts to family members in case of emergencies. In addition, visitors could explore a wide range of innovative technologies, including large language models, robotics, AI semiconductors, and cloud technologies. The event also featured a town hall meeting where the Minister of Science announced a national AI vision. This session included open discussions with participants, highlighting the government's efforts to develop policies in cooperation with the public. With this ambitious vision, South Korea aims to become one of the world's top 3 AI powerhouses. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet flagship, the USS Blue Ridge, was at the southern port of Busan following the trilateral multi-domain Freedom Edge exercise. And our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was among the press invited on board to take a look.
Docked in the port city of Busan is a rare view of a ship, the USS Blue Ridge, the command ship for the U.S. 7th Fleet since 1979. Commissioned in 1970, the ship operates out of its home port at Yokosuka, Japan, overseeing waters around the Korean Peninsula as well as parts of the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Flying the first Navy Jack flag, symbolizing the oldest active-duty U.S. Navy ship, this 19,600-ton ship has been fully deployed for her entire life, not once entering American waters other than Guam. A handful of reporters who were invited onto the ship to mark its first visit to Busan in more than 5 years were able to witness the ship bearing the marks of time but still boasting a formidable presence.
I'm currently standing on the helipad of the USS Blue Ridge next to a MH-60 Sierra helicopter used for search and rescue missions. This helicopter actually participated in the recent Freedom Edge exercise.
Through the Freedom Edge training, we strengthened our joint maritime operational skills. The port call also provided an opportunity for enhanced cooperation among our Joint Operations Command teams, further improving our joint operational capabilities.
Calling the ROK-US alliance a phenomenal relationship and cornerstone of both peace and stability in Northeast Asia, the commanding officer underlined that the recent joint exercise was more than just a drill.
These exercises have forged unbreakable ties, and the bonds are a commitment to our allies and other countries to ensure an open and free Indo-Pacific. One of the things that I will never forget during my career is looking behind and seeing the flags waving of both the Republic of Korean Navy and the Japanese with the U.S. flag as well.
USS Blue Ridge is soon to set sail from Busan port, but two navies' willingness to strengthen their joint defense posture can be seen through such visits. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Busan.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump unveiled a plan to put a tariff of 100% on all films produced outside the United States, following an earlier threat in May. Details on when or how the tariffs could be enacted have not been specified. On Monday local time, Trump posted on social media that every movie made outside of the United States will face a 100% import duty, accusing other countries of having stolen America's film business, just like stealing candy from a baby. He singled out California and the state's governor, calling them weak and incompetent in managing the industry. Industry observers raised immediate concerns following the announcement, as films are often co-produced internationally. While the latest tariff threat is not new, with Trump mentioning the idea once in May, the recent announcement carries renewed weight as the administration claims it is actively moving toward implementation. In Europe, Moldova's ruling pro-European party has secured a parliamentary majority in Sunday's elections, reaffirming the country's push toward the European Union. With over 99% of the ballots counted on early Monday, Moldova's Party of Action and Solidarity, led by President Maia Sandu, captured approximately 50% of the vote, winning about 55 out of 101 seats in parliament. That gives the party the rare ability to govern without forming a coalition. The Patriotic Electoral Bloc, a Moscow-leaning alliance, headed by the country's former president, trailed far behind with a little over 24% of the vote and a weaker showing than expected. EU leaders welcomed the result and praised Moldova for the peaceful conduct of the election. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky praised the results, saying that destabilizing activity from Moscow had failed to sway the people. In Madagascar, President Andry Rajoelina said on Monday that he will dissolve the government following days of youth protests. Thousands of young people have been protesting since Thursday, demanding reliable water and electricity amid nationwide frustration over prolonged power outages. Security forces responded with tear gas, and guards cleared barricades made of rocks and telephone poles. According to the United Nations, at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured. Protesters have also called for the resignation of Madagascar's prime minister and president, accusing them of governance failures. Finally, Puerto Rican superstar Bad Bunny has been officially confirmed as the headliner for the Super Bowl 60 halftime show set for February 8, 2026 in Santa Clara, California. The NFL announced the three-time Grammy-winning artist will perform at the event during halftime of Sunday Night Football. Bunny said in a statement that the moment goes beyond myself. He also dedicated the performance to his people, culture, and history. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The last day of September has come. As autumn deepens, the daily temperature range between the morning and the evening is widening. It started at 17.3 degrees Celsius in Seoul this morning. Daegwallyeong was down to single digits with a chilly 5 degrees. In the middle of the day, the temperatures rose significantly to 25 degrees in Seoul and 20 degrees in Daegwallyeong. It will start raining on Thursday night in Jeollanam-do province and Jeju Island, which will expand to other southern regions, the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province and the Chungcheong-do provinces on Friday. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Daegu will start off at 17 degrees, Chuncheon at 14 degrees. Daily highs move up to 26 to 28 degrees all over the country. Rain will mostly stop on Friday night, but the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province will continue to have rain until Saturday morning. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. Do stay with us and thank you for now.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요. 아무래도 연습을 할 때는 이제 생각과 고민을 많이 하는 반면에 무대에서 연주할 때는 정말 머릿속을 비우고 아무 생각도 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요. 무대에서는 자유롭게 콩쿨 무대도 저만의 독주라고 생각하는 자세를 가지려고 하고 있어요. 사실 바이올린과는 거의 제 인생의 대부분을 같이 해왔기 때문에 저를 힘들게 할 때도 많지만 제가 가장 사랑하고 아끼는 존재입니다. 작곡가가 전달하고 싶은 메시지와 또 제 자신이 관객들에게 전달하고 싶은 메시지를 모두 다 설득력 있게 잘 전달할 수 있는 그런 연주자가 되고 싶습니다.
North Korea's nuclear weapons will never be surrendered. This is according to its Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sun-kyung at this year's UN General Assembly in New York back on Monday. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's September 30th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. On the last day of this year's UN General Assembly, that is this past Monday, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sang-kyung took to the podium to reaffirm his regime's commitment to its nuclear arsenal. For more on this, I have Sébastien Felletti with French daily Le Figaro live on the line. Sébastien, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Good morning, good afternoon, Sonny. Yeah, it's been a while. Sorry to be online. I was hoping to be in the studio, but we had some traffic issue.
Right, Sebastian, it's still great to have you on. I also have Dr. Pong Young-sik at the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. Dr. Pong, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good evening.
Right, Sebastian, we start with you. Let's begin then with a recap of the remarks shared by North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister at the UN General Assembly.
Yes, this was a meaningful. This was a very meaningful appearance from the Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sang-kyung. First, because it's the first time a senior North Korean diplomat is appearing at the UN National Assembly since 2018, and this is extremely significant because it's not only more than 6 years, but it's also a lot of things have been happening around the world and on the peninsula. And since then, we can remember last time when the diplomat appeared, it was we were in a moment of honeymoon period between the US and North Korea, at least some warming up, just in the context of the Singapore summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And after that, we had the Hanoi summit, and North Korea didn't send anyone to New York. Then we had the COVID, which of course was an interruption. So the presence this year at the UN National Assembly is significant. It tells that North Korea is coming back to the global arena. It's coming back to the diplomatic front, and the foreign minister was extremely clear. He stated a position of North Korea, saying that North Korea will never give up its nuclear weapons. It says, I quote him, that they were sacred, they were part of they were equal to sovereignty for North Korea. They were enshrined in the constitution of the country, and so they were basically off the table of any negotiation, future negotiation with any other countries, and especially, of course, the United States. But at the same time, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs Kim Sang-kyung also indicated that North Korea was open to dialogue with any country. And here again, we can all think about the US. But basically, so it was a two-pronged approach, like showing some strength, some results, setting the tone, setting North Korea's condition for a talk, but at the same time, an opening for diplomacy on their own term.
Right,
that's what I would sum up briefly, but I'm sure Dr. Pong has much more to say about this.
Right, and that being said then, Dr. Pong, what were your takeaways from this UN address by North Korea?
Rather than what Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kim Sang-kyung, said in his speech at the United Nations General Assembly meeting, the more important thing is that North Korean government actually sent high-rank official to deliver the message to the entire world, especially toward the United States. The message remains the same, that North Korea will never abandon its nuclear weapons, because doing so would be abandoning its sovereignty, abandoning its right to exist, and it'll be a violation of its constitution. So North Korea armed with nuclear weapons is not just a matter of its national security, but it's a sovereignty issue, and North Korea will not be the same North Korea because it is enshrined in its constitution as a nuclear power state. So Vice Minister Kim's message is a repetition of the long-standing position of North Korea as for its nuclear weapons and missiles. But at the same time, as Sebastian said, that there is an opening for dialogue, that North Korea is open to engage in for dialogue and cooperation, with a lot of issues for countries that show the respect and friendship to the Republic. So it's a clear message toward South Korea, Japan, and the United States to meet the conditions demanded by North Korea if they want to do something about reduction of nuclear threats and capability of North Korea. North Korea is only open to the dialogue and negotiations that will eventually recognize North Korea as a de facto nuclear power state. So any talks with North Korea will not be for the purpose of denuclearization, but arms control that recognizes North Korea as a nuclear power state.
Dr. Bong, do you suppose such hardline rhetoric from North Korea, including, of course, its leader Kim Jong-un, is an attempt perhaps to seek some sort of leverage ahead of potential talks with Mr. Trump then?
Definitely, right? When somebody so strongly denounces something, that is ironically and psychologically speaking, the person may want that so dearly. So repetition of a very strong message by Mr. Kim Sang-kyung, representing the Foreign Ministry of North Korean government, and reiteration of the previous message delivered by the Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un that sharpening nuclear weapons are shields and swords for the survival of the Republic. But at the same time, Mr. Kim Jong-un, the Supreme Leader of North Korea, made it clear that he is open to meeting with the President of the United States if the United States abandons the pipe dream of denuclearization of North Korea and recognize the hard reality, which is North Korea has multiple nuclear warheads and missiles. And if the United States have a genuine intention to foster peaceful coexistence between the two countries, then he is amenable to the idea of having another round of diplomatic meetings with the leader of the United States.
Sebastian, there has been talk about the need for Europe to bring up to date its North Korea policy, especially amid reports that North Korea could possess more nuclear weapons than the UK by the year 2035. Now, currently the UK stands fifth, after France that is, with 225 nuclear warheads as compared to France's 290 that is. And Sebastian, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong with those numbers. But what more can you tell us, Sebastian?
Well, first, the big picture is that, of course, a lot of things have been happening since Europe has been engaged with North Korea. We know that previously, until the year 2000, the EU was trying to play a bridging role between the US and North Korea. There was some policy of engagement at the beginning of the 2000 years, and some member states of the EU had opened some representation, even Pyongyang. There was a push, and of course all this has been frozen, and in the face of the rationing of tension on the nuclear front over the past few years and the failure of diplomacy. But also there have been some significant change because, of course, the last few years, Europe has been extremely busy with another major geopolitical challenge, which is the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the threat posed to European security. And of course, a major fact here is that for the first time we have an external country, North Korea, who has been sending troops to Russia to support Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine. So this is a major concern for Europe. But interestingly, the EU and European countries have been, of course, shocked by this fact, but they haven't really updated their policy on this. We can say that actually within Europe there is a big difference between the majority of EU states who are kind of distracted and still see the North Korean issue as very far away, despite the presence of a North Korean soldier on the European soil. But there's also countries like the UK and France who are permanent members of the Security Council and who are both nuclear power, who of course look at this in a very different light. They look at this with a strategic view of a nuclear power, and they are adamant that North Korea should not be recognized as a nuclear state. This is especially the case of France, who has been actually quite having a hawkish stance on the North Korea issue. They didn't establish diplomatic relation, and they are still sticking to this position that there should be a denuclearization of the peninsula. So of course, countries like France and even the UK are now watching what's going to happen between the US and North Korea, because if there is some hint from Washington that the US could drop its refusal to admit North Korea as a nuclear state, that would be kind of a challenge for those capitals. When it comes to the nuclear arsenal and the fast-growing development of North Korea, we know that Kim Jong-un has said he wants to develop, as he said, exponentially his strategic arsenal. There are different reports about where they are actually standing from. It's very hard to verify because, of course, there's no access. I mean, some people have been arguing they have enough fissile material to do at least 50 nuclear bomb and potentially enough material to do 90 nuclear bomb. But some other report, as you quoted, are saying that potentially if nothing happened in the coming years, North Korea could reach that threshold of 300. But there's a big if here, because first, we don't know the reality, and there's a big question mark here is about also the delivery ability of North Korea, because it's one thing to have the nuclear material, but you also need to have ICBM that are functioning. You need to have a full surveillance system, and all these things are still very much in question. Do they have this ability to actually strike and to a great power nuclear arm like the US or some other country? That's still a very big question mark. So the bigger picture is more for Europe to be able to look at the North Korean issue in a different light, interlinking it with what's happening in Europe. And this is a big challenge for European policymakers because, as I said, they are extremely busy on Ukraine and internal woes. So it's a big question that we need to watch in the coming months.
Right. Well, for President Lee Jae-myung, though, Dr. Bong, he has proposed a phased approach to denuclearization. He shared the proposal at the UN General Assembly under an initiative abbreviated as END, referring to exchange, normalize, and denuclearize. Dr. Bong, could you walk us through the potential pros and cons of this particular proposal?
The acronym END, as explained in his speech at the United Nations General Assembly meeting by President of South Korea Lee Jae-myung, means exchange, normalization, and denuclearization. And I don't think this is a concept that has been through very close and effective coordination and cooperation among different branches of the Lee Jae-myung government of South Korea, because different government branches have different explanations about this concept of END. The Ministry of National Unification says that this is step-by-step sequential approach to denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, but President's office and the Foreign Ministry deny these sequential aspects of the concept, that these three elements may be pursued approximately at the same time, not necessarily in sequential manner. So it seems like one particular ministry of the Lee Jae-myung government must have the ears and the intention of President to have him actually deliver this message at the United Nations General Assembly. But this concept is far from clearly defined. So actual implementation of this END vision does not bode well. First, exchange is the first step for this process, but exchange between the two Koreas is premised upon sanction relief on North Korea. And everyone knows that sanction reliefs cannot be done by South Korea alone. It was partially tried during the previous Moon Jae-in government, but it failed because any attempts did not overcome the hurdles imposed by the existing economic sanctions on North Korea. So the key is held by the United States, not by South Korea. And North Korea knows this very well. So North Korea has no business in responding to the proposal of exchange by Lee Jae-myung government of South Korea, knowing that South Korea has nothing to offer North Korea. North Korea would be better off to just wait out until the Trump administration of the United States will begin engaging with North Korea. Then exchange between the two Koreas will possibly happen anyway. And second ambiguity is normalization, the second element of the END. The concept of normalization is premised upon the admission of the reality that something is in the state of being abnormal. Then what is abnormal? You have to question. The abnormal state on the Korean Peninsula is a national division between the two Koreas since the end of the Second World War. Then, does this concept mean that South Korea is going to revise its constitution and agree with the North Korean government's declaration of a new policy that the two Koreas are now two separate sovereign states, not two divided Koreas pursuing eventual peaceful unification? That may be feasible. Then what kind of reward can South Korea expect to gain by making this huge concession? We are talking about revising the constitution of South Korea and making national division a permanent state on the Korean Peninsula. And the Lee Jae-myung government is very silent on these important issues.
Dr. Bong, I wonder, simply speaking then, how feasible do you suppose would this step-by-step strategy be?
Again, the exchange may be happening, but after there will be important agreements forged not between the two Korean governments, but between North Korea and the United States. Because South Korea can only offer very small amount of economic benefits to North Korea. And North Korea knows this very well. The important benefits will be coming from any decision made by the Trump administration of the United States. We have to remember that Kim Jong-un's major demand at the 2019 Hanoi summit meeting with the US President Donald Trump at the time was a sanction relief, cancellation of 5 most recent United Nations Security Council resolutions against North Korea. South Korea does not have any authority about any changes regarding these United Nations Security Council resolutions. So exchange may be happening, but it is premised upon nothing between the two Koreas or nothing related to what South Korean government can or cannot do. But the consequences of the future negotiation between North Korea and the United States.
Sebastian, speaking as a correspondent based here in this part of the world, what have you been hearing on the ground with regard to President Lee Jae-myung's approach to tensions on the Korean Peninsula over North Korea's nuclear weapons ambitions?
Well, it looks like on the surface, it sounds like a repetition of an old playbook that we've seen in the previous Minju-dong administration. President Moon Jae-in, it seems like President Lee is trying to do the same approach, which is to engage North Korea. But actually, when you look at it, it's a much more pragmatic approach. I mean, President Moon Jae-in was personally deeply engaged into improving the relationship with the North, also because of his family background, because his family was coming from the North. President Lee Jae-myung is far more a pragmatist, and meanwhile we know that North Korea has turned its back on the South. They have said they are cutting all relationship, they are not interested anymore in improving ties. So there's a totally different setup. So it sounds like President Lee Jae-myung is more trying to to accommodate, to avoid escalation during the coming years of his mandate. And the problem, as Dr. Bong says, is what kind of leverage does he have? Because you can argue that President Moon Jae-in, at least in the past, could play the role of a matchmaker, if I may say, because at that time the US, the Trump administration, North Korea didn't have a channel of communication solid, and President Moon Jae-in was capable of helping that. Today, as mentioned, I mean, North Korea and the US don't need South Korea to talk to each other effectively, and yeah, the benefit that North Korea can get from South Korea are dwindling. So there's a big question mark as how South Korea is going to manage to have a seat in the room if this negotiation takes place. It was already a big challenge 7 years ago, and in the end South Korea couldn't really sit in the room when it was in Hanoi or in Singapore. But here the road looks even more steep if anything happened between Trump and Kim again. So I think this is President Lee Jae-myung is also hoping that he can mitigate the pressure from Donald Trump by showing him that he can help on his North Korean diplomacy. But again, he has very little leverage in his sleeve, so it's going to be an extremely challenging process ahead.
Right. Dr. Bong, we are counting down roughly about a month to the two-day APEC leaders meeting here in South Korea starting October 31st. Now, aside from the main multilateral meeting, talk about a few sideline summits are making quite a bit of headlines. Which do you suppose are some of the potential bilateral summits that should remain on South Korea's radar, and why?
Of course, the biggest crown jewel of sideline bilateral summit meetings in conjunction with multilateral meetings taking place at the 8th summit meeting held in Gyeongju, South Korea, would be potentially the bilateral summit meeting between China and the United States. Because the tariff negotiations between the two superpowers, militarily and economically speaking, have not reached any resolution yet. And the expiration date for the 90-day pause is coming nearer and nearer. The deadline for these two economies to settle the tariff dispute is the 10th of November, only less than 2 weeks after the APEC summit meeting held in South Korea. So it is speculated that the two leaders would come up with some important breakthroughs in the sidelines of the APEC summit meeting because both leaders are now committed to attending the summit meeting. The downside of this speculation for South Korea is that it is good for South Korea as a hosting nation of the APEC summit meeting to see the participation of China and the United States, which enhanced the importance of the APEC summit meeting hosted by South Korea. But the downside is that any important issues that are related with the core national interest of South Korea may not be in the same context. So the success and failure of the potential summit meeting between Trump and Xi would be very important for South Korea. But if South Korea wants to take full advantage of this opportunity to push ahead with its own agendas related with tariff negotiation with the United States or its leverage upon inter-Korean relations, I don't think the United States will be so sanguine about listening to South Korea's requests and demands in this context.
Right, I see. Well, we have about a month to that multilateral gathering and, of course, the sideline event, so we'll have to wait and see. All right, Dr. Bong, thank you so much for your insights today. Sebastian, thank you very much for your time and thoughts.
You.
Right on that note, we end Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with more panel discussion.
어렸을 때 아버지가 클래식을 좋아하셔서 자연스럽게 공연장을 이제 가족들이 다 같이 가게 되었는데, 그때 포피아노 연주를 제가 실제로 가서 봤었는데, 그때 이제 너무 멋있다 생각이 들어서 부모님께 피아노를 하고 싶다고 졸랐습니다. 저조차도 누군가의 연주를 보고 이렇게 피아니스트를 꿈꿔왔듯이 누군가도 제 연주를 듣고 다양한 감정을 이렇게 느꼈으면 좋겠어요. 어쨌든 저는 21세기 사람이니까 21세기 트렌드를 또 잃으면 안 될 것 같아서 간혹은 또 가요나 팝송도 많이 들으려고 노력하고 있고요. 그러다가도 또 이제 다시 클래식으로 돌아오게 되더라고요. 그냥 클래식 음악은 진짜 어떤 시대에 들어도 누구나 공감할 수 있다고 생각을 해서, 그래서 클래식 음악이 제일 마음에 와닿는 것 같아요. 지나바카오 콩쿠르에서 특히 2라운드 연주가 저는 항상 기억에 남는 게 너무 무서웠어요, 사실. 한 음만 치는데 다음 음이 뭐였는지 기억이 안 날까 봐 너무 두렵더라고요. 악몽을 너무 많이 꿨었고, 연습을 하는데도 불구하고 끝까지 안 되는 음악적인 패시지라든지 테크닉적인 패시지들이 있는데, 그게 무대 위에서 정말 무의식적인 세계에서 갑자기 해결이 되는 경우가 있더라고요. 그랬을 때 이제 희열을 확 느끼는 것 같아요. 제가 지금 공부하고 있는 곡들, 즐겨 연주하고 있는 곡들이 사실 클래식 음악을 처음 접하는 분들에겐 익숙하지 않은 곡들이지만, 지금 제 나이에 가장 잘